My co-defendant Ty had left Badger section and entered protective custody. At first glance, this was good news for me because he had complicated the situation there in the reception yard. He was incapable of maintaining consistent, normal behavior for any length of time, and it was just a matter of time until he did something to get both of us into trouble. So I was glad to have him gone. But he had left in such a manner that painted a target on my back. Sam had told me the night before, after dinner, that I was going to be stabbed, and the only way that I could prevent it is if I agreed to beat him up the next morning at breakfast and take a kite back to the hole. I had agreed to do this in order to protect Ty, and then the next morning before breakfast, he'd rolled up telling the cops he was in danger. This was going to look really bad for me. Sam was going to assume that I was a rat, that I had told my friend that he was in danger and gotten him off the yard. If Filthy had been up all night the previous night making a piece and they couldn't use it on Ty, I had a pretty good idea on who they were going to use it on because it was going to get used. I could roll up. I could wait for the next cop to go by and tell him that I wasn't feeling well and I needed to go to medical. Since everything was shut down because Ty had just rolled up, I had the option of, once I was out of the cell, just telling them the situation, and since there were no inmates around, they'd get me right into protective custody. With the child molesters, the rapists, and the sex offenders, and I truly did not want to spend the entirety of my prison term around that filth. So I decided to take a risk. I decided to stay on the active yard and try to find a solution. I did have one thing going for me. I hadn't left my cell from the time that Sam told me what was going to happen to the time that Ty had rolled up, so there's no way that I could have told Ty in person. That meant the only way that I could have tipped him off is if I sent him a kite. Thankfully, Shotgun Steve lived right next to Ty and between him and I. So if I had sent Ty a kite by shooting a line over to him in the night, Shotgun Steve would know, and for that matter, so would my cellie Tony. If I could just get the opportunity to explain this to Sam, I was pretty sure that things would be okay, even though he'd looked at me in such a manner that I was pretty sure I was going to be greenlit the next time the door opened. And that was the problem. We were going to go out to Morning Yard. If I could talk to Sam, things might be okay. But it was quite possible that the euphemism is the door is the bell, that I was going to step out onto the tier and immediately be assaulted, stabbed. That morning, I was late on the release schedule, which means that all of the other inmates had been released to yard except for just a couple whenever I was finally released to yard. I stepped out onto the yard and saw the primary workout group, the Woods, Filthy, and Sam, and a couple other guys at the wood pile, kind of setting up their little workout area. I was lucky that we had Morning Yard, because on Morning Yard you can bring a jacket out without seeming really suspicious, even in the summer because you go out pretty early. A jacket is important. If Filthy had a piece, if one of Sam's torpedoes had a piece, a jacket is a layer between you and them. And if you really have time, you can take that jacket off and wrap it around an arm so that you have something to block that knife with. You don't need to survive long. If you can just make it 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, those cops are going to be there, they're going to have that guy with a knife off of you, and you have a chance to get to an operating table. Whenever things are tense, inmates take towels out to a yard. At Badger section, it was just a done thing. You took your towel out to a yard. It's difficult to explain exactly what a prison towel looks like. I got a terry cloth shop towel. You can see this is short. A real prison towel is about twice as long, but it's pretty much this fabric right here. You go out to yard, you wrap it like this, and you hang it around your neck, and it's very casual. You'll see a lot of inmates that do this. But if things get tense, you have a moment, and you grab it, and you flip it, and wrap it. That way you've protected your carotid artery. Whenever that guy comes at you with a knife, you need to protect your face, you need to protect your brachial, and you need to protect your vital organs, but your carotid is relatively protected. That morning I went out with a towel, I went out with my jacket, and I saw that Filthy was between me and Sam. What this meant was that I was going to have to walk past Filthy to Sam. I walked quickly. I didn't run. I didn't want to create the impression I was rushing Sam. I didn't want to make anybody tense, but you'd better believe I wanted to talk to Sam fast, as in fast before somebody stabbed me. I went up to him and I was direct. I told him, Sam, Ty rolled up this morning. I was going to get him. While I was saying this, Filthy was behind me and my back was burning. For all I knew, he had the piece in hand and was getting ready to open me up like a fish while I talked to Sam. But turning to face him wasn't going to do me any good whatsoever. The problem was the shot caller. The problem was Sam. He was blunt. He looked me directly in the face and said, Aaron, I think you told Ty to get off my yard. This was the moment, and I was listening to hear if maybe Filthy would set his feet differently, and I could hear the scuffle, so I knew I needed to turn and get that towel around. I was watching Sam's face for maybe just that. That would be enough that I knew that it was on, and I had to be ready. I told him, we can solve this right now. There's no way I could have told Ty what was up. And things froze for just a second. I feel like I was about 3 seconds away from getting hit. Sam stopped, and he looked at me and said, what do you mean you couldn't have done it? And I said, I couldn't. I was in the cell all night long. From the time you told me to the time whenever he left, you watched me lock up. I could have sent him a kite. But if I did, Shotgun Steve would know about it. His cellie would know about it. My cellie would know about it. Right? It was just that night. There's no way I could have told him. Sam looked at me for a second, and he laughed. He laughed and tossed his hands in the air and said, you're right. Hey, Filthy, get Shotgun Steve over here right now. I want to talk to him. It didn't take 2 minutes. It didn't take 2 minutes of the 3 guys who would have known if I sent Ty a kite saying that I didn't, for things to de-escalate. It didn't feel so tense. Filthy quit hovering right over my left shoulder like he was getting ready to introduce my internal organs to the outside. That was one of the most intense experiences of my incarceration. Fear is a funny thing. It can make you freeze. I didn't want to walk past Filthy. I didn't want to put my back to him. I could just feel that knife going into me and I couldn't see him. But that was the solution. The solution was not to look at my fear. The solution was to find a way out of it and look at the way out instead of the thing I was scared of. I often talk about situations in prison, things I learned in prison, and how they apply to the real world, but this one is so universal. We are afraid of so many things in life. We're afraid of losing the things important to us. We're afraid of pain, death, poverty. And the fear is a good thing. It makes us work harder, move forward, be stronger, for as long as we let it push us from behind. But sometimes in that moment, whenever you're driving the car and you lose control for that half second, whenever you're swimming and your leg cramps and you don't know if you can get to shore, whatever it is, that moment whenever the real fear hits you in the pit of your stomach, you can freeze. You can stare at it and just not know what to do next, and things get worse and worse, faster and faster. I say take a moment a lot. You're going to have to take a fast moment whenever that fear is building and whenever you have to think of the solution, but that is the thing to do, is to take that fraction of a second and decide that fear does not control you. Fear doesn't own you. You walk past the guy with a knife at your back and you look the solution right in the eyes and start finding a way out of it. Because if you don't find the solution, nobody else will for you.